I'm going to call the meeting of the Environmental Rules Board of August the 9th, 2023 to order. Welcome, everyone. This still seems strange to me. We used to have a full room, and now we have to keep looking over our shoulder to see the rest of it. But several of us are here today, and usually we Zoom, so glad to have all of you, whether you're here or whether you're Zooming. We do have a quorum. I'm going to now call on the board members to indicate their attendance at the meeting, whether you're Zoom or whether you're in person. Commissioner Rockensous.
Here.
Mr. Davidson. Don't think he's going to be with us today. Mr. Esler? Dr. Nemry?
Here.
Mr. Horn?
Present. Present.
Yeah, there. Your mic's not on, Mr. Bortner?
Here.
Ms. Brown?
Here.
I'd like to welcome Jamie Brown. She is new to the commission, representing manufacturing.
Thank you.
Dr. Alexandrovich?
I'm here via Zoom.
Mr. Kesselberger?
I'm here.
I'm glad to see you.
Thank you.
And we have another new member, Rick Zaire,
And I'm here.
and he represents construction, and chair is present, so we do have a quorum. Our first order of business today is the approval of the summary of the June 14th, 2023 board meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the summary as presented?
Yeah, at the bottom of page 1, there's typo. It says airport fees. It should be air permit fees.
You're always good at that. Do we need a motion on that?
We'll just make the amendment.
Yeah.
If there are no other corrections, this is Ted Nemec. Also, I believe there should be a correction in the second paragraph of the commissioner's report. The spelling of Ms. Reneker's name does not match what it is in her email, according to what we've received. It's spelled with first name Collen in the minute summary.
And it should be how? Okay. So noted, any other typos or anything like that? Okay, is there a motion to approve?
So approved. This is Ted Nemec.
Second, Ken Rulon.
Voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Summary of the minutes are approved as amended. Commissioner Rockensous, your report.
Good afternoon, Chair Guard, members of the board. Thanks for being here or online today. Welcome, Jamie and Rick, to the board. Thanks for being here as well. So as an update from the agency, the last month and a half or so, and then continuing on until later this fall, Drake Abramson, my legislative director, Parvani Stover, my chief of staff, and I have been traveling around the state meeting with legislative leaders just to talk about what issues they're seeing, providing information to them on what we do as an agency, why we do it, how we differ from EPA, what our relationship is like with EPA. The last couple of years, just listening in and some of the issues Drake has dealt with, seems to focus on things where there's confusion on where our authority lies and where EPA begins, or vice versa, and why we do things and how we do things. And so we thought it was important to travel around the state to meet with people in their districts, to just start building relationships with some of these folks. There has been a decent number of legislators that have turned over in the last 4 or 5 years. And so a lot of them come in not knowing what every agency does, especially one as technical and sometimes big, as at least the topics big as we are. So so far we've been in New Albany and Evansville. Our next stop is in Portage, Indiana. We're scheduling stops, I know, near Goshen and Fort Wayne and Terre Haute. We're going to be doing some regional ones with legislators in the donut counties as well. So hoping the relationships start getting better. We start communicating on a better clip than we have been, because it just helps us stem off issues before they become issues that the legislature needs to deal with, which most of the time we shouldn't have to. I mentioned last time that, you know, we've been heads down trying to figure out how we're going to implement the new rules process through House Rule Act 1623. Nancy and her team recently met with Office of Management and Budget, the governor's office, to make sure that the process in which we believe is how we can move forward is correct. Items or the Environmental Rules Board process is still different than all the other rules boards, because we flow in and out of Title IV and Title 13, where all other agencies are now under Title IV. So it does create a little bit of confusion, but we have a roadmap set out. Our next step is to check in with the Attorney General's office to make sure they agree with that, because they sign off on all our rules, so we don't want to have any rules invalidated. And then Nancy's team is working on putting together documentation and flow charts, et cetera, for the board, so everybody knows what the path forward is going to be. And we'll have a better update on that probably at if we have another board meeting this year, at our next board meeting. We've been super active recently, and I mentioned this a little bit last meeting on the topic of wetlands and WOTUS and all of that. The second decision came down, which I mentioned last time, which changed the dynamics on who regulates which wetlands in each state. And so with that discussion, we started engaging with the Builders Association and their members and the consultants to figure out, with the isolated wetland statute, what's working, what's not working. Largely what's not working is the form we've been using, and there's confusion on it. So the first meeting went really well. Everybody was freely talking about issues, which was great, because that doesn't always happen. And then we had a subsequent meeting with a smaller team of consultants and IDEM staff. And what I heard coming out of that is there was a lot of agreements on how to move that forward, which is great. There will be some kind of legislation this next session to clarify some of these things. But I think coming from it together, rather than on opposite ends of the spectrum, is super helpful to move whatever we move this next session forward with, hopefully low or little amount of resistance. We are also on staffing, a quick update there. Yeah, I guess I did mention Colleen Renaker in the last meeting, because we're correcting her name. She is our new Deputy Assistant Commissioner. We're also working on hiring the 15 new drinking water staff that we got funding for this last session. And because of the duties we're taking on from Homeland Security and some of the other changes to the excess liability trust fund statute, we'll be hiring another 3 people in that area. And I don't think she mentioned this last board meeting, but Marianne Stevens, our longtime rule writer, especially in water quality issues, retired after 47 years. She retired last Friday, and what was really cool is I mentioned it to the governor's office, and they quickly got me a distinguished shooter to give to her because of her years of service to the state. And then finally, part of 1623 as well has to do with anybody that collects fines or penalties or fees, anything like that. That stuff has to be in rules now, which our fees are. Our fines are not, our penalty dollars are not. Those have always been through an unreal policy document that we haven't really changed in 25 years. So because of that, we are taking that policy, we will be drafting it into a rule form. I actually have to go in front of budget committee to get that approved, and I have to do it by the end of this year. So we will be going, they have a meeting in September, October, and December. So I'll probably hit the October and December meetings. But our penalty policy was actually used as the draft that other agencies should look at to draft their own penalty policies. It's pretty well laid out. It gives you like the maximum we can do each day, and then it puts you into a matrix on whether you're a minor violator or a major violator, or your violation is that way. And so we're not changing anything with the policy. It hasn't had any issues over the years, so I'm hoping budget committee will go well and we'll get that moving pretty quickly. And that is it from my report.
Is there any change to the way that this board will do business in the new statute?
Not necessarily how you do business. I think there's a potential change in how many hearings we have to have on particular issues. If we don't get substantive comments on a particular issue, so like the air fees, right? Because that's coming out today. If we've got substantive comments in which we would need to change that rule, we would have to have another hearing, which we do anyway. So that's really not a change. If we don't have substantive comments on things, I think we could do one hearing and then move it forward. So it does potentially cut down the amount of time that the board has to spend on a particular topic. On our end, the agency end, there are a lot of different things that we're gonna have to do now, right? So when we public notice a rule, the first notice is, hey, we're thinking about doing a rule, what do you think? We can't do that now, right? When we do, we have to have the language with it. It has to be a full rule that we're giving to the public at that time. We're today, we do a first notice, hey, what do you think? We don't have language. Then we do a second notice, here's the language, what do you think? And then we have a hearing. So it kind of cuts out that, it combines the first and second notice together, which is somewhat of a streamlined approach, but we also only have a year now to get a rule done. So we have to have, on the agency side, all our ducks in a row before we put out a rule, because we gotta make that year time frame. And if we don't, we have to have a date certain in which we're gonna get that rule done. And because some of our rules can be contentious at times, we're gonna have to do a lot of that background first before we even initiate like a first notice like we would in the past.
So no more 13-year rules like we.
There may be 13-year rules, but you won't see them until that 12th to the 13th year. Yeah, no more anti-degs.
Anybody else have a question for the commissioner?
I did have a question on the Department of Homeland Security responsibilities that are transferring to item familiar with the approach to reporting, is that staying with unused?
That's the thing with them, what we're taking on is they had a program in which they licensed people that installed underground storage tanks. And it actually, that whole program just fell on the fire marshal, who is not in the business of underground storage tanks. Now why they got put there, who knows? But we met with, Director Thacker, who was the fire marshal before he was Director of Homeland Security. And he started asking us questions about what we do with tanks, and the meeting went on forever because we wouldn't shut up about what we do with tanks, because that's what we do. And he's like, you should probably take this on. And then a legislator had a constituent issue. And then it became his idea, which was great, that this should move over to IDA. And so it just makes it more cohesive. And then we are able to see from the minute it gets installed to the minute there's an issue, what's going on in the ground. Because there's been times where we have had people open up the ground to see why the tanks are leaking, and the installer literally took a pipe, bent it, put it on a paint can. And because of the corrosion over time, that was an easy place for it to fail. We can hopefully stop that from happening in the future. Yeah.
Any other questions? Anyone, on Zoom have a question for the commissioner?
Yes,
Yeah.
please. Oh,
Oh.
go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, so Chairman Grice, I had a quick question for Brian. Have we had any more contact with the people in Carmel? We kind of promised them that we would stay in touch, so the IDEM would, and has that still been going on like we promised them?
Yeah, I actually asked this morning, I met with Aaron this morning if we had had any more communication from them. We did go out and do another inspection. We didn't find issues, and we haven't really heard back from them since we made that initial contact. So I did ask them to reach back out and just make sure that we're not dropping the ball anywhere, because we want to be responsive.
Thank you, that's great to hear.
Thanks, Ken.
Okay,
I do-
Dr.
Yes, thank you. I'm just wondering on that new rulemaking, is there anything to encourage more public participation? I know sometimes, it's been a while since we've really had a lot of comments, and it's a little bit discouraging to me that the public's not involved more.
Yeah, so. I mean, now with any kind of public notice, there has to be rule language that goes into it. Which. On one hand, I could see why the public would maybe not want to participate if you don't know our system and you have to comment once about what you think and then comment again, you may think, well, I already commented, why do I need to comment again? So that might help encourage a little bit. All board meetings and across the state now have to be live streamed, and we have to keep records of those. So hopefully that will drive more interest in the people participating, or at least paying attention to what's going on. And really it's most of the rules we do affect different industries of some kind. And we've been doing a lot of engagement with those different industry groups, so they participate more. Because the thing I hate dealing with the most is, that we were passing a rule, we don't hear about there's an issue with the rule for X industry or X population of people until after the fact, and then it becomes a legislative issue. Well, if we would have dealt with that while we were doing the rulemaking, maybe we wouldn't be dealing with it with the legislature. It makes it easier if we do it on the front end than the back end.
I'm a fan of streamed hearings. Ken brought it up. I wasn't going to bring it up, but you guys know me. On transport trucks, that are transporting gravel, who enforces the rules to cover all that, to cover the trucks?
Like when you're driving down the road,
Yeah,
DOT.
because That seemed to be one of the complaints of those folks, and the videos we got from the companies there, you couldn't see it to the very end, and the one truck that they showed wasn't covered. And I've kind of noticed around my town that there must be something that those people don't want to cover their trucks. You would think that there could be something simple that we can encourage them to make sure that the trucks don't leave the property without being covered. So that was just my observation and concern.
Yeah, we can definitely reach out to the folks at NDOT about that. I know when I'm driving down the road and there's a truck that's not covered, I quickly pass them because I don't want the rocks hitting my windshield.
Well, there must be something hard about covering the trucks, because more are not covered than are covered.
Most of them have to have a certain size, they have to have the screens to go over.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on. Chris Peterson for rulemaking report.
Hello, I'm Chris Peterson, Rules Development Section, Office of Legal Counsel. Before I start, I wanted to mention that it appears that Bill Essler and Cal Davidson are both on the Zoom call now.
Okay.
They weren't before, but they appear to be on there now. We do not have a recommendation for a date for the next board meeting. And this is in part because with our rules that are currently in process under the old rulemaking process, we just don't have anything where we can predict when they're going to be ready to come to the board meeting. And then, as the commissioner mentioned, with the new rule process, we're still working out some details, and those rules will have to be fully developed before they can be noticed and then brought to the board. So we don't have a predicted date for the next board meeting to recommend, but as soon as we have rules that are ready, then we will be in touch with the board and work out a schedule to have another board meeting.
Okay.
That's all I have.
And we don't know if this will be your last board meeting or not. Because we don't know whether we'll have another one. Chris is retiring to the end of the year, which we don't really mention. Okay, any questions for Chris? Either here or Zoom. Okay, today we have hearings for the following regular rule board actions: final adoption of Title V permitting fees, wastewater treatment plant operator certification. There will be also be a presentation on the non-real policy document, allowable substitutions for prerequisite education and experience wastewater operator certification. As a reminder, if you wish to testify in any of today's hearings, please fill out a comment card and give it to Carla Kendrick at the sign-in table. The rules being considered at today's meeting were included in board packets and are available for public inspection at the Office of Legal Counsel, 13th floor, Indiana Government Center North. The entire board packet is also available on ITEM's website at least 1 week prior to each board meeting. A written transcript of today's meeting will be made. The transcript and any written submissions will be open for public inspection at the Office of Legal Counsel. A copy of the transcript will be posted on the rules page of the agency website when it becomes available. Will the official reporter of the cause please stand, raise your right hand and state your name?
Libby Meyer.
Do you solemnly affirm that you will keep complete and true notes of all that transpires and prepare a transcript thereof and faithfully perform all duties imposed upon you as an official reporter of the state of Indiana?
Yes.
Thank you. And I might add that those of you on Zoom can also testify. You just have to hit the little thing on the screen so they know you want to speak. This is a public hearing before the Environmental Rules Board of the State of Indiana concerning final adoption of 326 IC 2-1.1-7 Title V permitting fees. I will now introduce Exhibit A, the preliminarily adopted rule into the record of the hearing. Seth Ingersoll will present the ruling.
Members of the board, good afternoon. My name is Seth Engdahl, and I'm a rule writer in the rules development section within Items Office of Cleveland Council. The rulemaking currently under consideration is statutorily mandated and would increase the annual base fee for two permit types: Title V operating permits and federally enforceable state operating permits, or PSOPs. Currently, there are around 1,100 sources in Indiana that would be impacted by this increase. This rulemaking would increase the annual base fees for these permits from the current fee of $2,381 to $6,100, resulting in roughly $4.3 million per year in revenue to support the Title V permitting program. For some background on this rulemaking, the Clean Air Act requires state air permitting programs to be supported by fees sufficient to cover all direct and indirect costs incurred in the development and administration of the program. Without proper funding, the management of the program would be ceded to US EPA. Currently, IDEM charges Title V sources two fees: an annual fee and a fee based on the tonnage emitted. Over the past decade, the agency has seen a steady decline in billable emissions. While a reduction in overall emissions is certainly beneficial, it has resulted in a growing deficit, currently $2 to $3 million for the Title V permitting program at IDEM. Accordingly, the agency worked with the Indiana General Assembly and interested stakeholders to pass legislation to raise the annual base fees to allow for a more predictable income stream for the program and prevent the program from being ceded to US EPA. This culminated in the passage of Senate Enrolled Act 155, which was signed by the governor on April 20th of this year. This rulemaking and the legislation mandated it are necessary to fully fund the Title V permitting program. This is only the third time IDEM has raised its Title V fees in the past 30 years, with the most recent increase in 2019. A statutory cap of one increase of 10% or less per 5-year period remains in place. However, the cap was bypassed by Senate Enrolled Act 155 for this increase. IDEM requests that the board approve this rule as presented, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for anybody here? Anybody on Zoom? Okay, thank you very much. The hearing is concluded. The board will now consider final adoption of 326 IC 2-1.1-7, Title V permitting fees. Is there board discussion? Okay, I need a motion to final adopt the rules as presented.
Ken Rowlands moved.
Get that? Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, I can call the roll. Mr. Davidson? Mr. Davidson?
I thought this was sweet. I'll let you read
Well, we'll check and see if he's really here. Mr. Edsler?
Aye.
Dr. Nemec?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes. Yes. Mike not on.
Gardner?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Ketzenberger?
Yes.
Chair votes aye. Is Mr. Davidson on? I guess-
Chairman Guard, am I not on your list? Joanne Alexandrovich votes yes.
Same here for Emily Totten with the IEDC. I vote yes.
Just to be sure that your mic's on.
Did you call Mr. Zaire?
Mr. Oh, I'm sorry, you're on this list. Mr. Zaire.
Aye.
Also, Ken Rulon votes yes, Chairman Guard. Thank you.
Yeah, called your name too. Okay, Mr. Davidson, are you there?
Cal, do you want to vote? You're on mute.
It's not there. The rule is adopted 12-0. This is a public hearing before the Environmental Rules Board of the State of Indiana concerning final adoption of 327 IAC 5-23 wastewater treatment operator certification. I will now introduce Exhibit B. The rule is preliminarily adopted with items suggested changes into the record of the hearing. Crystal Hackney will present the rule.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Crystal Hackney, and I'm a rule writer in the Rules Development section within the Office of Legal Counsel. I am here to present rule number 18-365 for wastewater treatment plants and operators. This rulemaking repeals the existing rule at 327 IAC 522 and replaces it with 327 IAC 523. This rule addresses state statutory requirements made in 2015 and 2018 that affect IC 13-1811. These statutory changes allow electronic examination through a third-party administrator, add certification examination fees, require proof of compliance with continuing education requirements submitted with certificate renewal applications, update the renewal cycle for operators' certificates from 2 years to 3 years, and add reciprocity for certified operators from other U.S. territories applying for certification in Indiana. The new rule reorganizes and restructures sections as well as updating them with the necessary changes. Changes that have been made since preliminary adoption have been indicated in the board packet on the rule information sheet. A clarification was made at 327 IAC 523-10B and C. These subsections have the same intention, and item felt that it should be worded similarly. There have been no additional changes made to this rulemaking since preliminary adoption. Item will present a non-rule policy document concerning the education and experience substitutions to the board here shortly. Item requests that the board final adopt this rule as presented. Program experts and I are available to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Is there anyone here that wants to speak or question? You have a question? Okay. Anybody there have any questions? Is there any, do we have any speaker cards? No, they don't. The hearing is concluded. Board will now consider final adoption of 327 IAC 5-23 wastewater treatment plant operator certification. Is there any board discussion? Any board discussion? Okay, I need a motion to adopt items suggested changes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Davidson?
I just got a text from him.
Hmm?
I just got a text from him. He's dropping off.
Okay. Mr. Ensler?
I vote aye.
Dr. Neri?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, Chairman Guard, the mic is not flipping back to you sometimes after Chris speaks, so that may be what the problem is.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Do you hear it when I speak?
Yes, Brian, very clearly when you speak, yes.
Yeah, I'm having some kind of problems, Ken. I don't know what's going on, but I appear to have mine set up all right, but I don't know.
I- We hear you. Other Zoom people.
Okay, thank you.
I think that there may be some roll call issues. I haven't heard my name, and I know Dr. Alexandrovich didn't hear her name. Perhaps it's worth going over again.
Did you hear Senator Gard now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Not very well.
The microphone may not be very close to you.
Unless I even. What about this?
Yes.
Okay, well, we'll go with this. Ms. Toten. We're voting on accepting items suggested changes.
Thank you. I vote yes.
Ms. Porter,
Yes.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Sersky. Yes. Second. Mr. Etzler. Mr. Etzler.
Yes.
Dr. Nemec.
Yes. By the way, I would say the microphone fades out with each person, but yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes. My mic is on. I don't know what else to change on it.
We're hearing you, Mr. Horn, on Zoom. We are not hearing the room right now.
Okay, thank you.
Mr.
Rulon?
Mr. Rulon.
Yes, thank you.
Ms. Toten.
Yes.
Mr. Bordner.
Yes.
Ms. Brown.
Can I ask you to please repeat what we're answering right now? Because I'm not sure. I think I already voted once.
This is the vote on the final adoption of the rule as amended.
Yes.
Dr. Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Ms. Kuzinski,
Yes.
Mr. Ketzenberger,
Yes.
Mr. Zaire,
Yes.
the chair votes aye. The rule is adopted as amended. We will now have a presentation on a non-rule policy document by Jason House of items, Office of Water Quality regarding allowable substitutions for prerequisite education experience, wastewater operator certification related to the rule adopted today on wastewater treatment plant operator certification in 327 IAC 5-23.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Jason House. I'm the branch chief of compliance and enforcement in IDEM's Office of Water Quality. I come before you today to present the non-rule policy document, water-020 MPD for final adoption. So, and thank you for, doing the final adoption on our rulemaking to change operator certification. This coincides with that rulemaking to allow for substitutions for education and experience for operators to sit for an examination to become an operator in the state of Indiana. So the non-rule policy document does set forth the circumstances where individuals applying to become an Indiana certified wastewater treatment operator who do not currently possess all the required education and experience required by 327 IUC 5-23-9 may be given credit for these deficits by substitution of other qualifications that they may have. The non-rule policy document presents specific guidance for allowable substitutions for each of the 10 wastewater operator license classifications. The basis for the language in the NPD was derived from prior guidance, case examples, discussions with individuals from the industry, and considerations from item staff, and how to provide better avenues for new individuals to become certified, while maintaining the professional integrity of the certification program. Item's goal with this non-rule policy document is to be transparent, consistent, clear, and reasonable when reviewing applications to determine when and how to apply the substitutions to sit for the examination. The document was placed on public notice from June 6th, 2023 through July the 21st, 2023. No public comments were received during that period. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have about the non-rule policy document.
I did, will you be approaching any of the trade associations, Alliance for Wastewater?
We worked with the trade associations during the rulemaking process and during the development of the non-rule policy document. So they were involved in the discussions when we were developing the substitution outlines that we have laid out in the non-rule policy document.
Okay, just, I know you in the past you've worked with MCECA on other issues relating to that. I don't know if there's any rollout other than just posting this on the website.
No, we worked directly with them. They were provided the language and provided input to us as we developed the non-rule policy document, substitutions of experience.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Any questions from Zoom people? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, this is an open forum. There's one thing that I want to mention, before I ask for anyone else. There were several questions concerning, the issue that we had talked about up on 96th Street with gravel pits. I have had a couple quick conversations with a resident there who actually is going to be helping them, I think, with the issue. It wasn't really previously involved. And the one thing that it occurred to me, and I discussed this with Nancy the other day, that it might be good, and I think you agreed with me, if you didn't say so, but that we have just a one pager that's just suggested guidelines for how people that are gonna bring a petition, citizens petition before us, you know, what they need to bring with the original petition to essentially convince us that they have an issue that's not devoid of merit, and that it might be a little bit helpful to have that something for them. And Nancy, you want to mention that?
Yeah, we did talk about that, and I do think it's a good idea. I mean, I've given, whenever we have these, we don't have them very often, but whenever we do, we provide those folks as well as you with what the statute says. The statute is not particularly deep in terms of what the discussion is. You have to have a certain number of petitioners sign off. There's no information as to what the the opening statement or how you explain what you're petitioning for is on there. We've tried to put together a pretty rudimentary, this is how it works, this is what we're gonna do. And we've based that on how this board over the years has handled these, and they don't come by very often, but when they do, it's always sort of a different situation. The situation we had with the various towns that are working with their long-term control planning is a good example of one that's very different from the ones that we've had in the past, where someone says, I have a problem with this rule, it seems out of date. You're talking about something that doesn't happen anymore, so maybe we should update it. Something more concrete like that, I think, is what the statute was sort of intended for to a certain extent, and it hasn't changed in years. I'm not suggesting that the statute changed, but I do think that basically this is another avenue for people to be able to address the board, and they don't, I'm used to you guys and how we do our board stuff, but people don't get that, and so I think that as Chair Guard said, we did talk about me putting together something, our office putting together something that explains what it is that makes sense for folks to bring when they have the petition. Yes, we have to verify that there's enough petitioners on it in accordance with the statute. And basically what the statute requires is if the board hasn't had a hearing on this particular issue, and that is not defined either on this issue in the last 6 months, then they can make a determination as to whether whatever is brought before them has merit, or as the statute says, is devoid of merit. I did get a question about sort of what that means. I tried to provide a pretty simple, just one pager to the board members as to what the concept of devoid of merit can mean. And because it is the board's decision, as bossy as I am, I can't tell you, well, this is what you need to do and this is fine, just vote on. I would never do that. No, nothing, Commissioner. I do think that this is a good situation that proves that, you know, when someone sees that there's a petition out there, like the 4-H folks sent information to the board members about how they follow the rule and all that stuff. You know, I'm not sure the folks that were on the petitioner side were aware of that, because it wasn't something that we sent out. It was something that they chose to get a hold of the board members about. And on one hand, we certainly want to encourage people to talk to the board members. That's why there are various representatives on this board. On the other hand, we certainly don't want you inundated with things, you know, that you don't even know, like, well, I haven't gotten anything from ICANN, why am I getting all this stuff? You know, it's a fine line, but by the same token, we certainly want to be as transparent as possible, and we want the board to have the information necessary to decide whether something is a meritorious thing too, and you have to look at it this way. It's only asking to have a hearing. It's not saying you have to adopt a rule. Again, the example of the cities and towns working with their long-term control planning. It turned out that it turned into a work group with our folks in water that has worked out well. So it didn't really involve changing rules or anything, but it is the board guiding the agency on how best to deal with an issue that someone brings up. And I don't think that has been made as clear as we can make it. And this is an example for us to learn. I do think that, again, you know, when the board had a discussion at our last meeting about this particular petition, I think probably the petitioners felt like, well, we shouldn't really get into the whole thing until the board says, let's have a hearing. And they maybe thought, well, that's just what they're going to do. That's the next step. They'll say the next thing we'll do is have a hearing. So I think there was a bit of confusion, you know, from their perspective on that. And I do certainly feel bad that they felt that they were, you know, sort of boxed out. It was not the intent. We were just following how we've done it in the past. So maybe something like this is something that we can clarify. And you know, I can draft something up and I can bring it to this board, you know, at the next meeting, or I can send it out to you beforehand and just get your thoughts on it. I don't want it to be, you know, 100 pages or anything, but I want it to be helpful for people, sort of a guidance on how we see this statute and how the process works based on what we've done in the past. So that's kind of the plan, I think.
Yeah, I think that would be good, and these are so few and far between that we have new people coming on this board oftentimes.
Right.
between petitions, and I'm sure it would help clarify it for them as well, because the statute is a little strange. Well, it happens every once in a while.
Thank you.
Okay, this is an open forum. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board?
Chair Guard, it's Joanne. I'm just gonna throw this out there because I had this thought, I already brought it up earlier after our last meeting, to help with their problem. I don't know if it will or if it won't, but it seems to me that there could be some kind of permit requirement, some kind of enforcement mechanism that the trucks have to be covered before they go through the weigh station, that they can't get through without covering the truck. So that's my idea to throw out there for whoever wants to hear it.
That would be interesting to see the reaction to that, yeah, which I agree, uncovered trucks are a menace. I mean, just on the highway, I've been hit by stones and I think most everybody has at one time in their driving career. So, yeah, that's one thought. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, if there's no other issue to come before the board, we will be in touch with you as to the next board meeting. It's a little up in the air right now, depending on what they have to present to us, and we don't need to just be meeting, so. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. This is Ted Nemec.
For a second? All in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay, thank you all for your participation.